They say it takes a village to raise a child, but it only takes 9 seconds to steal one. 9 seconds. That is the exact amount of time between a mother looking down at a buzzing phone and looking up to find a hole in the universe where her son used to be. 9 seconds for a life to end while the heart is still beating. In this city, the police response time is 7 minutes. By then, the van is gone, the plates are swapped, the trail is cold. But while the cameras were watching the traffic and the pedestrians were watching their screens, something else was watching the street. We call them homeless. We call them bums. We step over them like piles of trash, training our eyes to slide off their existence so we don't have to feel guilty about our lattes. But we forget one thing about the invisible men and women who sleep in the doorways of our skyscrapers. When you are invisible, you see everything. And tonight, the monsters who took those children made a fatal mistake. They didn't check the shadows. If they had, they would have seen Silas. And if they knew who Silas used to be before the whiskey and the grief took him, they wouldn't have just driven away. They would have driven straight to the precinct and turned themselves in. Because the police fight with laws. Silas fights with ghosts. It was a Tuesday, 4:17 p.m. The golden hour wasn't golden in Silas's part of town. It was just rust-colored, the dying sun reflecting off the grit of the underpass. Silas was tucked into a recessed doorway of a shuttered department store, nursing a lukewarm coffee he'd bartered a cigarette for. He was watching a mother, harried, distracted by her phone, loading groceries into an SUV. 2 kids, a boy maybe 6, a girl older, around 9, were hovering near the back bumper, laughing at something on the sidewalk. Silas watched them with that dull ache in his chest that never really went away. It reminded him of his own before the fire. Then the world tilted on its axis. A gray Econoline van, rusted around the wheel wells, screeched against the curb. No plates on the front. The side door slid open with the violent metallic rasp of a guillotine blade. It happened so fast that if you were blinking, you missed the setup. But Silas wasn't blinking. He saw the 2 men, dressed in nondescript dark clothes, move with terrifying, practiced efficiency. He heard the girl scream, a high, piercing sound that was instantly muffled by a gloved hand. "Get them in! Now! Move!" one man barked, his voice like gravel in a mixer. "Mommy!" the little boy yelled, a split second before he was yanked off his feet and thrown into the darkness of the van. The mother dropped her phone. She screamed, a sound that tore the evening apart, running toward the van, clawing at the closing door. "No! My babies! Please, no!" she shrieked. The driver floored it. The van jumped the curb slightly, knocking the mother backward onto the asphalt, and sped away, tires smoking, vanishing into the labyrinth of the city's industrial district. It took 9 seconds. The street erupted in chaos. People rushing to the mother, phones out, dialing 911. The sirens started wailing within minutes. Silas remained in his doorway, frozen, the coffee cup crushed in his scarred hand, hot liquid burning his skin. But he didn't feel it. He only felt the cold echo of that little boy's cry. "Mommy." The police arrived in force. Blue and red lights painted the brick buildings. Silas watched from the edge of the caution tape as a young uniformed officer took a statement from a hysterical witness. "I don't know, officer. It was just a van. Gray, I think. It happened so fast," the witness was stammering. Silas stepped forward. He cleared his throat, his voice unused and rough, like rusted wire. "It was a '08 Ford," Silas said. The officer barely glanced at him. Custom reinforced suspension in the back. Smelled like burned transmission fluid. And the guy who grabbed the girl, he had a spiderweb tattoo on his neck, left side. The officer looked up then, his eyes scanning Silas's dirty coat, his matted beard, the entirety of his disheveled existence. The look of dismissal was instantaneous. "Okay, buddy, thanks for the tip. We got it covered," the officer said, turning his back. "Someone get this guy behind the tape." Silas didn't argue. He was used to being invisible. He just turned and walked away, melting back into the darkening alleyway. They had computers and radios and helicopters, but they didn't know the city's basement. They didn't know the places where things went to disappear. Silas did. The hunt began not with a high-speed chase, but with a slow, agonizing shuffle. Silas moved through the subterranean network of the city. The homeless grapevine is faster than Twitter and more accurate than the evening news. He descended into the old subway tunnels, the ones abandoned in the 70s, where the air was thick with mold, and the only light came from ventilation grates high above. He found Doc, an ex-medic who lived in a maintenance alcove. "Doc?" Silas said, his voice echoing strangely in the tiled tunnel. "I need eyes." Doc looked up from a book he was reading by candlelight. "Silas, you look like hell warmed over. What's shaking the street above?" "Two kids, snatched, an hour ago on 4th and Main. Gray Econoline. Needs transmission work." Silas leaned in, his eyes intense. "The cops are looking at traffic cams on the highways. These guys aren't on the highway. They're underground, or as close to it as a van can get." Doc adjusted his broken glasses. "Gray van, yeah. Old man Rivers, the guy who collects cans down by the shipyard? He was complaining about a van nearly running him down by the old meatpacking plant 20 minutes ago. Said it smelled like death and burnt oil." The meatpacking plant. Of course. It was slated for demolition 5 years ago and forgotten about. A massive, sprawling complex of brick and iron by the river, completely off the grid. Silas used to oversee the pouring of the loading docks there a lifetime ago. Silas emerged from the tunnels near the riverfront. Night had fully fallen. The city skyline glittered behind him, a fortress of wealth and safety, utterly disconnected from the grime he was wading through. He approached the plant. It was a hulking cadaver of industry, silent except for the wind whistling through broken windows. The perimeter fence was chain link, topped with razor wire. Silas found the weak spot he knew would be there, a drainage culvert underneath the north corner. He crawled through the muck, the icy water soaking his jeans, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. Every instinct yelled at him to run away, to find a warm grate and forget what he saw. He was 55 years old, malnourished and tired down to his very soul. He wasn't a hero. He was just wreckage. But as he pushed himself up from the mud inside the fence line, he saw it. Parked deep inside the cavernous loading bay, hidden from the street view, the gray Econoline. The hood was ticking with heat. Silas moved like smoke toward the main building. He slipped through a side door that was hanging off its hinges. The inside of the plant was a cathedral of shadows. Moonlight sliced through the skylights, illuminating dust motes and massive dormant machinery. He heard voices echoing from what used to be the foreman's office on the mezzanine level. He climbed the iron staircase, silent step by silent step, the metal groaning softly under his weight. He flattened himself against the corrugated wall outside the office door. "Told you it was clean," one voice said, deep, agitated. "The driver. Nobody got the plates because there ain't any. The mom was screaming her head off, Vane. This is too hot," another voice hissed. The one with the tattoo. "The buyer wants a quiet handoff at dawn. This ain't quiet. Shut up and watch them," Vane snapped. "Zip ties are tight? Good. I gotta make a call." Silas heard heavy footsteps moving away, down the back stairs. Vane was leaving the area. It was just the tattooed man and the kids. Silas peeked around the doorframe. The office was lit by a single battery-powered lantern on a desk. The two kids were sitting on the filthy floor in the corner. Their wrists were zip-tied with brutal tightness. The girl, Maya, had her arms around her little brother, Leo, rocking him. Their faces were tear-streaked maps of terror. The tattooed man was pacing, smoking a cigarette, his back to the door. He had a handgun tucked into his waistband. Silas knew he couldn't fight this man. Not in a fair fight. He was weak, and his hands shook. He had to use the only weapon he had left, the element of surprise, and the rage that was currently boiling the blood in his veins. Silas didn't sneak in, he exploded in. He grabbed a heavy rusted pipe lying near the door and slammed it against the metal doorframe with a deafening clang that sounded like a gunshot in the enclosed space. The tattooed man spun around, dropping his cigarette, his hand going for his gun. But Silas was already moving, roaring, a guttural, primal sound that didn't belong to a human being. It was the sound of a father who had lost everything and refused to lose anything else. "Hey!" Silas screamed, charging. The man panicked. He fumbled the draw of his weapon. In that split second of hesitation, Silas didn't attack the man. He attacked the environment. He swung the heavy pipe with all his remaining strength at the lantern on the desk. Smash! The glass shattered, and the room plunged into absolute, suffocating darkness. "You son of a..." the man yelled, firing blindly. Blam! Blam! The muzzle flashes briefly lit up the room like strobe lightning. Silas dove for the corner, shielding the kids with his own ragged body. He felt a searing line of fire across his left shoulder. A graze. He ignored it. "Listen to me," Silas whispered frantically into the dark, his breath smelling of old coffee and fear. "I'm going to cut these ties. When I say run, you grab his hand and you run down those stairs. Don't look back. Go to the road and scream. Do you understand?" Maya nodded against his chest, trembling violently. Silas fumbled in his pocket for the small, dull folding knife he used for everything. He sawed at the thick plastic on the girl's wrists, then the boy's. The tattooed man was shouting now, kicking over furniture. "Where are you, trash? I'm gonna put you down." Silas stood up in the pitch black. He needed to draw the fire away from the stairs. "Over here, you coward!" Silas bellowed from the opposite side of the room. He threw the iron pipe. It clattered loudly against a metal filing cabinet. The man turned and fired 3 more shots at the sound. Blam! 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 "Now! Run!" Silas screamed at the kids. He heard their small footsteps pounding down the metal stairs. The kidnapper realized the trick. "No!" He lunged toward the doorway to cut them off. Silas intercepted him. It wasn't a fight. It was a collision. Silas threw his entire body weight into the man. They crashed to the floor in a tangle of limbs. The man was younger, stronger, and fighting for his freedom. He slammed a fist into Silas's face, once, twice. Silas felt his nose break, the warm gush of blood. But Silas didn't let go. He wrapped his arms around the man's legs like an iron clamp, enduring the blows, just buying seconds. Every second he held on was 10 feet of distance from Maya and Leo. The man finally kicked free, landing a sickening blow to Silas's ribs. Silas gasped, curled on the floor, unable to move. The man scrambled up, gun in hand, and ran out the door to the mezzanine railing. He looked down into the cavernous plant. The kids were tiny figures sprinting toward the sliver of moonlight at the bay doors. He raised the gun, aiming down into the dark. Silas, lying in a pool of his own blood on the office floor, saw a lever on the wall near the floor. It was an old hydraulic release for the overhead crane system he used to operate. It probably didn't work. It hadn't had power in a decade. But Silas prayed to whatever God looks after the forgotten ones, and he yanked the lever down with his last ounce of strength. A groan echoed through the plant. Massive, ancient gears high above in the darkness groaned to life, powered by some residual hydraulic pressure. A massive steel hook and pulley block, weighing easily a ton, suddenly released from the ceiling directly above the mezzanine railing. It didn't fall fast. It swung. A giant, rusted pendulum of death. The kidnapper heard the whoosh of air a fraction of a second too late. He turned just as the steel block caught him square in the chest. There wasn't even a scream, just a sickening thud, and the man was swept over the railing, disappearing into the dark machinery below. Silence slammed back down on the warehouse. Silas lay on the floor, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of his own ragged breathing. He heard sirens in the distance, getting closer. The kids had made it to the road. By the time the SWAT team breached the main doors, their tactical lights slicing through the gloom, they found the kids huddling near the entrance, freezing but alive. They found the driver, Vane, trying to flee in the van, blocked by 4 cruisers. They found the tattooed man broken at the bottom of a stamping machine. And up in the office, they almost missed him. A young officer, the same one who had dismissed him hours earlier, swept his flashlight across the floor and saw the army jacket. "Cap, up here! We got another one. Looks like a homeless guy. He's hurt bad." They approached him cautiously. Silas was sitting up against the wall now, trying to wipe the blood out of his beard with a trembling hand. The captain, a grizzled veteran, knelt down. He looked at the scene, the cut zip ties on the floor, the broken lantern, the sheer chaotic bravery of what had happened in this room. He looked at Silas, really looked at him for the first time. "Did you do this?" the captain asked, his voice quiet. Silas just coughed, wincing from his broken ribs. "The kids, are they okay?" Yeah, they're okay. Their parents are on the way. You saved them, buddy. What's your name?" Silas looked at the officer. He looked past the light into the dark corners of the room. "Doesn't matter," Silas whispered. The paramedics arrived, fussing over him, loading him onto a stretcher. They brought him out into the blinding lights of the police cruisers and ambulances. Then a cry broke through the noise. "Silas, that's the man! That's the nice man from the dark!" It was little Leo, breaking away from a paramedic, running toward the stretcher. The mother, her eyes swollen almost shut from crying, ran after her son. She stopped fast when she saw the man on the gurney, bloodied, filthy, smelling of the street. She looked at the police captain, confused. "This man? He saved them?" The captain nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am. He took on 2 armed traffickers with a rusted pipe and the lights off. He's the only reason you're holding your kids right now." The mother walked up to the stretcher. She reached out a manicured hand and took Silas's grimy, scarred hand in hers. She didn't care about the dirt. She wept openly, pressing his hand to her cheek. "Thank you," she sobbed, over and over. "Thank you. Who are you? How can I ever repay you?" Silas pulled his hand back gently. The painkillers they'd given him were starting to fuzz the edges of the world. Just watch them closer," Silas rasped. "The world is hungry." They took him to the county hospital. He was treated for a gunshot graze, 3 broken ribs, a broken nose, and severe dehydration. The story hit the news cycle by morning. "The Guardian Ghost," the headlines read. "Homeless hero saves siblings." People wanted to find him. A GoFundMe was started that raised $50,000 in a day. Job offers poured in. The mayor wanted to give him a key to the city, but when the hospital orderly went to check on him in room 304 the next afternoon, the bed was empty. The sheets were neatly folded. The donated clothes were left on the chair. The only thing missing was his old army jacket and boots. He didn't want the money. He didn't want the key to a city that had locked him out years ago. He couldn't handle the light. Silas is back out there tonight. Maybe you'll walk past him. He's on a different grate now, in a different alley. He's nursing cracked ribs and watching the street with eyes that are a little older, a little sadder. You won't see him. You're too busy looking at your phone, looking at the bright lights. But don't worry, he sees you. And more importantly, he sees the things that hide in your shadow. And for tonight at least, the city is a little bit safer because of the ghost that haunts it.